Welcome to the Social Media Takeaway. I'm your host, Louise McDonnell, and today I'm being joined by Aisling O'Rourke, a communications coach, passionate about communicating with clarity. And today we're going to be discussing the importance of putting communications at the core of your business strategy. Hi everyone, you're very welcome to the Social Media Takeaway. So today I'm speaking with Aisling O'Rourke. Aisling is a communication coach and she's passionate about communicating with clarity. She offers communications and media coaching for business people, and she helps business people cut through the noise and stand out from the crowd, which is really, really important. So today we're going to be speaking about the importance of putting communications at the core of your business strategy. Aisling is also the host of the podcast, Cut Through the Noise with Aisling O'Rourke. Aisling, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So do you want to maybe tell us about your journey? How did you come to be where you are today?
Well, I suppose I started off as a fairly hard-nosed news journalist. So that's where my career began. Most of my career has been working in media across Ireland and with some international work as well. So I did the news rounds in local radio stations, national, and worked for international outlets then as well. And I was raised in a house where we loved talking and debating ideas. And I'm an only child. So at a very young age, I got very good at speaking to adults and with adults, So storytelling has been part of my life since I can remember. But also, I live with invisible disability. I was diagnosed with a number of autoimmune diseases as a very young child. And as a result of having one particular consultant who really made it his business to involve me in the conversation around how to mind myself and I mean, my first diagnosis was 2 weeks after my third birthday. And this guy, Dr. Colin Costigan, who I believe is still practicing and he's at Temple Street Hospital these days, but he made it his business to make sure that I was involved in that conversation. And he encouraged me and my parents to allow me advocate for myself from a young age. I think that, in hindsight now, I can look back now and see how unique that was and how it's helped me to this very day. So as I said, I became a news journalist mainly with broadcasting in radio stations. And I worked for the likes of Midlands 103 and Clare FM, and went off to News Talk, Today FM, and eventually became senior editor with Russia Today. Now, I made that leap to Russia Today from a very good job, which I loved in News Talk, in November 2017. And between the long and the short of it, Russia Today decided in June of 2018 that they were closing their Dublin office. So I had left the permanent safety of Marconi House in News Talk just 8 months previous to that. And it was a bit of a life quake, is how I put it. And at the same time, a member of my immediate family became terminally ill and I became a carer overnight. So 2 things happened in a 6-month period that year, which forced me to reflect on how I was living my life. I was in a career that I knew I was very good at and I had good success in, and I thoroughly enjoyed. But I was essentially working 365 days a year, because I think people don't realize that as a news journalist, specifically as a news journalist, you're constantly switched on to what's going on in the world, because when you show up at the news desk, you don't have time to catch up on what's happened since your last shift. So there is no real time off duty. You're constantly keeping an eye on the phone, keeping an eye on the news, even when you're on holidays. And that's not sustainable for a long time without consequences for your health and your social life and time with family. So that year I went back to college, and I had always had this idea of helping people with their communications. Didn't know what that was going to look like, but I knew it was something I wanted to do. And because of those 2 big life quakes, as I call them, I said, you know what, life is short. I could be hit by a bus tomorrow and gone. Why not give it a go? Why not figure this thing out? What is it? Why have I've been, at this point, I'd already been a news anchor responsible for editing on a news desk at a national radio station. I had hit my goals. I was still in my early 30s. I needed some new goals and new ambitions. So I went back to college to train to get my level 9 postgrad in teaching adults. And then I did another level 9 in entrepreneurship, and the communications coach was born.
And I always say to people that the foundation of anything that you do, I was meeting with somebody earlier on and they said, why isn't my social media working? And I'm like, well, actually, what you're doing on social media is fine. Technically, the way you're showing up and the types of content that you're producing, but you need to be much sharp. You need to be better at communicating your core messages. So yeah, and I think a lot of the time businesses think they know what their core messages are, but they just haven't spent the time kind of sitting down and working on them so that they can quickly and efficiently articulate them. So is that what you do now? You help people identify their core messages. Okay, brilliant. And so tell us, like, what's the process involved, or how do you do that?
So generally speaking, it's one-to-one online or an hour a week for a number of weeks, depending on the scale of the project. We start off by figuring out what the problem that we need to solve actually is. Okay. Because I think that can be a big stumbling block. Like you say, the people are putting content out on social media, but they're not getting the sales in. And they're going, like, why? I don't understand. Like, I was speaking to somebody who runs a beauty salon and was annoyed that a certain competitor in the locality was doing great for makeup for events, but she wasn't getting any of that kind of business. And I'm like, but you're not communicating that you offer that as a service. And I know, and I'm using that example as a really obvious one because for podcast listeners, it's we understand what it is to get our makeup done, or what it might look like. But it was that simple. They were not telling the customer about all the services that they offered in an easy to understand way. And I think when you're running a business and you're there, like, if you're running a business, it's never just 9 to 5. It's your life,
Mm-hmm.
And you put all your blood, sweat and tears into it. You're under pressure, maybe trying to maintain salaries and overheads. And it can be very difficult to understand why the message is not coming across, because it's very hard to get outside of your own head.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like your business inside and out. You are the expert in your business, but that doesn't mean you're communicating it clearly to people who are not an expert in your business. And I think the mistake an awful lot of people make is they assume the audience has the same level of knowledge about what they do as they do.
That is so true. Yeah, that is so true. And just going back to your point there about, like, what you put out on social media has an impact on what you get back. That's what I always say. Like, I remember doing some work with a lady, and she was a physiotherapist and she was also a yoga instructor. And she said to me, I just can't fill my physio clinic, but my yoga's full. It's at capacity. I don't want any more people for my yoga. And then when I looked at her social media, I was like, but all you post about on social media is yoga. And she goes, yeah, that's because I like posting about that. And I'm like, well, that's what you're getting in, because that's what you're putting out there. So I think sometimes people don't think about it as well. And it's only when you pointed out that so the first thing is identifying the problem.
The first thing is to identify the problem, and then it's building a strategy as to how we're going to solve it.
Okay.
With me, I do assign homework. It is coaching. I do not offer full service PR. That's what large PR firms do for you. And they have their niche and I have mine. So I help you do it for yourself. And I coach you through the process over a number of weeks in how to do it. I like to try and tailor it as much as I can to the person or the company that I'm working with. So if there's maybe a product you're about to launch, or, a particular stumbling block, like, say, for some business people, they're getting media opportunities to go on traditional media, but then they go on and they're not getting anything as a result of it because they're not making the most of the media opportunity.
Okay.
So for some clients, it might be coaching them and training them in how to do an interview, how to be a good interviewee, because there's a difference between selling your services and being able to talk about your business easily to a journalist. And then for others, it might be getting over the fear of public speaking. I know I need to be showing up on Instagram, and I know I need to be doing my reels, but the thoughts of putting myself on camera makes me want to get sick, Mm-hmm. So I do try to, while there are consistent steps through the process, I try to tailor it so that I'm really helping people in a very tangible way for them. It's not a one size fits all service.
And so if there's somebody listening in here today or this evening or whenever they're listening, and they want to, they recognize that maybe they're not clear on their message. So what steps would you recommend that they follow to gain that clarity?
Do a test. If it's a service-based business, if we took that as an example, and if you know that your elevator pitch at a networking event is just not hitting home, do you have clients that you trust, that you've built up a good relationship with, that you could send them a quick survey and say, listen, I'm updating my branding here. I'm updating a few pieces myself. How would you describe what I do? You have to, it has to be tested, and you have to fine tune it. And then you have to have the patience to give that messaging time to see if it works, because there's a difference between refining your message and constantly chopping and changing your messaging. So like say your client where they're yoga and physio services, they need to be promoting both equally. And it's not that, well, today I'm a yoga instructor and tomorrow I'm a physiotherapist and I'm two different people depending on the day of the week. You have to have that consistency in how you're communicating it, and it needs time to sink in. And I think sometimes in this, I like to refer to it as the attention economy. We lose patience very easily, even with stuff that we care about. So it is about putting the effort in, thinking about this, doing a bit of research, doing a bit of testing, and then sticking with it for a period of time to see if it actually is serving you in the way you hoped it would. And then maybe 6 months, a year down the line, reviewing that. But you would need to give it that bit of time.
Okay, very good. So you need to give it 6 months to see if it's resonating with people.
I think so, yeah. I really do.
And so what are the most common communication challenges that coaches and communications face in 2024, Aisling?
I think for coaches and consultants, it can be like, it's not the same as going to a shop and buying a pint of paint. You go into the shop, you know what color, you have an idea what color you want, and you go in and you pick it up and you go home. And the paint shop is selling you paint in tins with clearly labeled, by color. And what's that word? Finish, satin or eggshell or whatever it might be. Whereas with coaching and consulting, it's not as tangible. And that, I think, is a big stumbling block. I think it's really a stumbling block for coaches as to how to clearly communicate the tangible benefits of hiring the coach, and there are lots of different types of coaching. Like, for instance, I'm not a life coach. I don't have a psychology qualification. That's not what I do. I coach you on communications. And that's, so I have to be very clear that when people hear that I'm a coach, that they know that there's no life coaching involved in this. This is for your business. It's about making things really blatantly obvious to potential customers, because you want to reduce any potential barriers to doing business.
Okay, great.
The other thing, if I may, Louise, is there is, I think, a particular problem with Irish people in not wanting to bother people. And, I don't know now if my services are for them. And it's very don't know if they'd have the budget. And you're almost apologizing for trying to run your own business before you actually go into that discovery call with the potential client. And you're underselling yourself a bit. And I think that's part of our conditioning as Irish people, that perhaps we could take some example from those nations, and I won't name any of them, that are slightly more confident in how they put themselves out there.
Yeah, I remember once, it was way before I had my own business, and I was working for a company, and like that, I think when you're working for somebody else, you've no problem asking for money. When you start your own business, I think it's a confidence thing. Like I physically couldn't be able to get the words out of my mouth if somebody asked me how much something cost. I'm over that now, but at the beginning I wasn't. But anyhow, I was working for this other company, and I had a woman in front of me telling me she couldn't afford whatever I was trying to sell her. And I remember looking down at her handbag, and it was like a very expensive, brand. And I thought, well, you're just making a decision on what you can afford. Mm-hmm. And that's down to them maybe not thinking that what I was selling them was worth it, so mm-hmm. There's probably a message in that too. Yeah, I completely hear you.
Yeah, and it's about that value piece.
Yeah.
Okay, money is a great communicator and all of that. Like, it's either in budget or it's not, depending on the figures. But what are you getting in return? What's the benefit? What's the value? And, that's what we need to focus on when we're selling. It's really important that you can communicate clearly the value that people will get from working with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going back to something that you said a few minutes ago, Ashley, and you were saying if somebody was going on a media interview, that there's a difference between going on and talking about their business and going on and pushing their services. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
If I take radio as an example, what a lot of business people aren't aware of is that radio in Ireland, quite rightly, in my opinion, is a very regulated industry. So I said earlier on, I was a news journalist. And as a news journalist, you are not prohibited to have an opinion on air. Your job is to facilitate the passage of information so that members of the public who are listening to the news can then make a decision and an informed opinion based on that information. So you have to be very neutral. Also, if you're interviewing a business person about their business, you have to be very careful that it doesn't fall into advertising territory, because advertising is supposed to be paid for. And radio stations can only have so many minutes of advertising on their schedule. So if you go in and all you do is like, well, my service costs this amount and this is what I do, and you can find out more about me on constantly trying to do the hard sell, the broadcaster has to rein you back in, because otherwise they will fall foul of the regulators. Also, it's not nice to listen to. You will turn listeners off. You will irritate potential customers by constantly doing the hard sell. If you approach it as a conversation about the business and answer the questions as honestly as you can and appropriately with your messaging, then you can answer that question and you can promote your services without doing the hard sell.
Okay, so you just kind of give good advice or position yourself as an expert in your field, give some advice that's going to appeal to your ideal customer, and they will then seek you out.
Yes. And 9 times out of 10, if it's an interview on a radio show or even a newspaper article, either a physical paper or an online one, they will give you a link to your company. They will give a link to the website or, find out more at this on Instagram or whatever it might be. But it's that there's a subtle difference there that is quite important. And it's really then about like really positioning yourself, as you say, like as the expert in this area, so that they then want to call you back.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah. And tell me, like when it comes to communicating, I know we're talking about communicating in general about your brand, but like how does that differ then when you're talking about social media?
It does and it doesn't, to be honest. Okay. I think the difficulty with social media is, and you'll know this as well, like there is a tendency to, oh, well, TikTok says I need to do this dance, so let's all do this dance. And like, that's grand and all, and it's a bit of fun. What is your company getting out of that day-long shoot of everybody learning how to do the dance on the team and picking out the nice clothes and whatever, If you're selling dance classes, great, wonderful, you're showcasing what it is you're going to learn during the class. Brilliant. But it wouldn't be for me appropriate because it's not relevant to what I'm selling. So I think that's the thing. I think with social media, you still have to communicate with clarity. You still have to do all those good communication skills that I teach people how to do. But it's about making sure that you're not falling into this trick of trying to copy the trend or keep the algorithm happy. Like the algorithms change overnight, every week. You will drive yourself insane trying to keep up with the algorithmic changes. So it's about sticking to your guns and learning how to do it best for your business, and then making sure for social media that you're getting to the point very quickly. So like if you're in a networking event and like years ago, you would have been told that your elevator pitch must be a minute long, because on average, that's how long the elevator takes to go from the ground floor to the top floor, whatever it might be. None of us wants to be accosted at a networking event and have somebody come up to your face and talk at you for a minute about your business, because in that context, a minute's a long time. So, 30 seconds max. Problem is in social media, the average attention span to a post or even to a website is 7 seconds?
If even, I would argue 2 or 3.
Yeah. So you have to get to the point faster.
Yeah, you have to have a good hook. You have to get
Absolutely.
them past 2 or 3 seconds to get them to 3 or 4 seconds to get them to 5 or 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So you need to be,
Yeah.
yeah. So don't be jumping on trends. Stay on message. Stay in your lane. Be more on brand. And then in terms of personal branding, if you have any advice there.
It's making sure that it's all consistent,
Mm,
and it's consistency is key, whether that's consistency in showing up regularly. It's about repeating your message.
hmm
I think some people think that when they do their personal brand and they get it sorted, that's it, it's one and I'm done.
hmm
But, you have to repeat that over time. You have to remind people. And I think that's the trick. So you have to be able to show up in that consistent way, because Louise might look at my website today and might like the look of it, or might look like the sound of what I'm selling. But Louise might not need it today. She might need it in 6 months' time.
hmm
And it's that consistency of reminding the marketplace that you still exist.
Yeah. So I will say that social media is about getting in front of somebody, letting them know very clearly what you can do for them, and
Mm.
then being there and reminding them you're there, so that when they have a requirement for what you're selling, that they think of you. I think
Yeah.
that's so important.
Just one thing though, and it is a bugbear of mine. For your social media posts, please make sure they're legible. So you have people doing Instagram posts with text in it, and you can tell they've gone and they've had them designed and they look brilliant. But the text is so small on a mobile phone that it can't be read. So make sure that it's legible. Make sure you don't have a orange text on a pale orange background. You've got people in the world who are colorblind. You have to make sure that your content is accessible. And that's something that I think is a real problem with a lot of content creators at the moment, a lot of brands. They're trying to fit so much text into that Insta story that they forget that that can't be read.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm not into overly graphic designs for Instagram anyhow, because actually as a platform, when you click on the image on a post or even in a story, you can't really zoom in on it. And people won't work that hard if they can't see something, if they can't read it because the colors are all kind of clashing with each other, or if they can't see it because it's too small, they won't try. They'll just skip on. I was saying, what was I saying in my last podcast? It's like maybe 86,000 seconds in the day. We're awake for 57,000 seconds. We're on social media for about 13,000 seconds a day. So if you're in somebody's newsfeed for 2 seconds and it's too hard, they're just going to skip on. They're just going to skip on. So tell me, what about AI? What is your take on AI in terms of communications?
I think it could be wonderful. Okay. I use AI. I was saying to you before we came on air, I use AI in managing my type 1 diabetes. It has been genuinely life-changing for me, to like in a positive sense. I think AI is wonderful for people who previously did not see themselves as writers. And when you are trying to communicate your message, you have to do a little bit of writing.
Mhm.
I think it's fantastic for people, particularly for people with real challenges with communications, like say, for instance, people who are dyslexic. I think that it's a really good tool, but you have to learn how to use it. And you do have to spend some time, like say, for example, if it's ChatGPT. I know there are other brands out there, but say, for example, ChatGPT. You do have to train it in your style of communication and your style of writing. Simple things like it's an American platform. So I find I'm constantly having to tell it, please use English Ireland as your spelling basis here, because we don't replace S's with Z's, those little nuances. And I see a lot on social media where people are just copying and pasting from ChatGPT, and it's very obviously ChatGPT.
It is.
And the whole point of communicating and this wonderful option that we have with social media, that we can go direct to market with our message without the need of third parties, is to stand out from the crowd. But if you're putting out if you're just feeding in a generic prompt into one of these AI programs and it's giving you back something generic, well, then you're not going to stand out from the crowd, because if you look at somebody doing something similar to you, ChatGPT is going to give them the same answer.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. There's certainly merit for using it. I mean, it's wonderful for brainstorming, or, if you need ideas, you just say, you feed it a really good prompt. You're like, I'm a coach, I'm a nutrition coach. I'm targeting women with, let's say, type 2 diabetes. Can you suggest 10 different polls I can run on Instagram, or 10
Yeah.
different, and then it will give you and you mightn't like any of them, but then you'll go, oh, but if I use a combination of the first one and the third one, then I've got something. So it's wonderful for brainstorming. It's also really good for doing some research, client research. So, again, you could say, I'm targeting people with type 2 diabetes. What are their pain points? How does this show up in their lives? So
Yeah.
it's wonderful, wonderful tool for that. But yeah, I can spot the ChatGPT posts a mile away. They always have the same formula. They always have this warming up useless sentence which is the first sentence of the post, full of emojis. And then the important stuff is 3 or 4 sentences down, and that just doesn't work. And it's always a bit too flowery. And as you said, it's if you're Irish or UK, the spelling is possibly
Yeah.
not in line with what you want. Yeah.
It is though great for like I kind of I play around with it a lot for ideas, or if I'm stuck for something, because a lot of the time my work is, alone,
Yeah.
and I don't necessarily sometimes have the second person to read it, even to proofread.
Oh,
Do
yes.
you know, I see companies, and it really does take away from your brand if you're putting spelling errors up in your social media posts. That takes away from your credibility as a business person. So like even simply putting in what you've already written and asking ChatGPT to improve it for spelling, grammar, and readability.
Yep.
And it's still then your content, it's still your messaging, but at least you've gotten it to proofread it for you.
Yeah, I do.
So
That's my favorite prompt. Check syntax and grammar.
yes, and like it's a really it can be really helpful, and there are so many other tools out there. I don't I don't think though it's going to get rid of the likes of you and me. I think we still need the human touch and the individualization, because at the end of the day, people buy from people.
Absolutely. Make us more productive, though. So that's what I was saying in my last podcast. I think it makes us, I think, 12% more productive. I think maybe between 20 and 25% more tasks done. And for a business owner or somebody running a business, like, that's important to be more productive. Get your time back, focus on doing higher strategy tasks within your business. And like the proofreading alone of ChatGPT is just absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I find it great. And if you had to, I used to ask, I had people I used to get to do my proofreading. I don't have to do that now, which is wonderful. Any other tools that you're using that you'd recommend, either AI or non-AI?
I am playing at the moment with Opus AI that a colleague suggested to me, because I have reluctantly had to accept that putting myself on camera is, the way the world is. And that's something I never like. I went into I've never had ambitions as far as going on TV was concerned, because I want to be the person on the radio, not the person in front of the camera. I have a master's in photography. I wanted always to be behind the camera. But the world is the way that it is. And so one of the things I find that the problem with video editing is, even though technically I can do it, I'm lucky that way. I have those skills. Time is an issue. And I just don't have the time to turn maybe an interview from my own podcast into a reel for Instagram, even though I know it would work. I just don't have that bandwidth at the moment. So I'm using Opus AI to upload my recordings, and I can put my brand identity in there. I can make sure that the captions are correct. The captions actually are quite correct a lot of the time.
So I don't know this tool. Tell me what it does, or for anyone who is not familiar with it.
So it's an AI video clipper.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not AI that's going to help you shoot an ad break or anything like that. Okay. It's, say you've had a conversation with somebody, you've recorded it over Zoom, and you're looking to get a couple of the key points out of that video for your social media platform. It, for want of a better way of putting it, listens to the conversation and picks out what it thinks are the key points from the conversation and turns them into clips. Now, I should say, Aoife O'Brien at the Happier at Work podcast is the person who put me onto it. I've been playing around with it, and so much so that I actually started paying for the subscription to it because I think it's so good.
And like, does it actually pick out the best bits?
Yeah.
Oh, right, because I'm obviously a control freak. I'm like, no, I'll pick out the best bits. I know best. So I will use descript.com.
Yeah.
And I think I just love that because you're editing the video by reading the text. So you can pick out anything that you wanted and cut it out, just automatically cuts it out of the video and the audio. So no, I don't actually do it, so I can't say any more than that.
Now, the only thing I will say with Opus is at the moment, it's just doing a vertical videos.
Oh, okay.
So it's not doing the landscape version. Like say, it's not doing the version that you might put up on YouTube, for example.
Okay.
Which to me, I don't understand why, because it clearly could do it. Easy for me to say that, I guess. I'm not a software engineer, but it looks like I could clearly do it. So I suspect they'll go down that route eventually. But yeah, for me, you upload the video, you can go and say for my podcast, I can go and focus on writing the show notes or the script for my intros and outros while it's doing the editing of the video piece for me. So it's all about efficiency of getting through the day. I think it's about, for me, what the value that I place on my own time.
Yeah.
So like if I can use an AI tool to do something like that doesn't really need me or my brain to be involved, and that means that I get to finish up early on a Friday afternoon and maybe go for a walk with the dog in the park or go meet a friend for a coffee, I think that's worth it for me.
Okay, brilliant. Any other tools you're using then besides Opus and ChatGPT?
No, I think they're the two main ones that I'm really loving at the moment. I've played around with Notion. It's like a project management app. People call it their second brain. And I've played around with it. I see the benefit of it, but I don't know that it's for me. I find out with these tools, I try them out,
Yeah.
It is or isn't,
Yeah, exactly. It has to fit into the way you work as well. And with your team, if you're working with a team of people, it has to fit in with the team as well. So you've started a new podcast, Aisling. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
So, as I said, I'm all about giving people as much value as possible. And I've worked in media for almost 20 years, and I have a lot to give back. And there's a lot that I can do through working one-to-one with my clients or in my workshops, but I wanted to add value to what I'm doing. So it's called Cut Through the Noise with Aisling O'Rourke, and it's available on Spotify and Apple and, the other random podcast places, but they're the two main ones. And really in each episode, I hope to give some tips and tricks for time-pressed business people. So the podcasts I've deliberately made them short, so they're no longer than 15 minutes. I do monologue episodes where I share like why you should be putting communications at the core of your business, why communications is not a soft skill, because that's a big one for me. But also I have experts in on email marketing, crisis communications, lots of different topics. And it's been something that I've wanted to do for quite some time now, and I've been able to make it work. I have a lovely young lady by the name of Amanda Fitzgerald editing it for me. And it's going fairly well at this stage.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And then if people want to find out more about you, where would they find you, Aisling?
thecommunicationscoach.ie is the website. And if you sign up to my newsletter there, you get a free video with top 5 PR tips. So that's totally free of charge. You just have to give me your email address. I'm on Instagram at thecommunicationscoach.ie and then just Aisling O'Rourke on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. So we will be putting in the show notes the link to that free gift. So thank you very much, Aisling, for the gift. Thank you very much for your time and for all the advice you gave here today. You've been a great guest, and I look forward to tuning into your podcast.
Thank you very much, Louise.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Social Media Takeaway podcast. If you loved this episode and want deeper support with your marketing, head over to sellonsocialmedia.academy/hello.